Welcome to RetinUp. I'm Scott Krzywonos.
And I'm John Kitchens,
John, we have a special guest today, somebody you know well.
somebody I'm proud to introduce. I've known Dr. Tom Stone for 23 years now, I guess. He's the reason why I got my job. He was the first person that I met here at Retina Associates of Kentucky. Tom's a fantastic retina surgeon, great critical thinker, but has been someone who has been so involved with ASRS. Many people know the PAT survey. Tom managed the PAT survey and was director of the PAT survey for 5, 6 years before handing it off. Now Tom is in charge of the business of retina meeting. And I think anybody who knows our practice knows that I run the business side of things. So it's a little bit funny that they would have Tom running the business of retina meeting. But I joke Tom runs our business and is very good at it. So with no further ado, I'd love to introduce Dr. Tom Stone.
Thanks, John and Scott. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it.
So let's talk about the business of retina meeting from the ASRS. Can you just tell us how this whole thing started and where it is this year?
Yeah. So the business of retina meeting is, one of the largest ASRS meetings after the main meeting. In fact, it is the largest meeting after the main meeting. It's been going on for over 25 years. We took a break for a year or two for COVID. And, it used to always be held in Dallas, but that facility didn't meet our needs anymore. And so we move it from we try to keep it somewhat central, but from East Coast to West Coast. This year it's taking place in Houston on March 20th, 21st, and 22nd.
So, Tom, you mentioned that it's the second most attended ASRS function behind the annual meeting. How many people attend? Who attends? Is it just for physicians? Is it for office managers, pharma? Who else is going to be there?
Yep, but you've named pretty much most of the attendees. Usually we have between 350 and 500 people attend. About a third to a half are physicians who are interested in running their business or being part of being their business. About a third are administrators, usually high-end administrators, revenue cycle management folks, practice leaders. And another third are industry, because, when industry comes, you've got all the decision makers on the business side of retina in terms of the physicians and the administrators. So there's a lot of really good conversations and networking going on at the meeting.
And what's going to be the main topic this year? Last year, probably I would say again this year, Good Days, always at the top. I think you
Yeah.
had the CEO of Good Days last year there. What other things are going to be covered?
Well, John, the theme of the meeting is we want people to come. This is a very focused meeting. They come in Friday night for if they get in time for their social time. It's all day Saturday and then Sunday morning. And we want people to learn things at these talks that they can go back to their office on Monday and start putting into practice to make their practice a better place for them to work, better for patients, better for staff, better for doctors. So, we break up into sections. We have very focused 20-minute talks with experts across the country. And then we have panels of all those speakers for each section. And some of the things are the things that you might imagine. We have talks about staffing. Staffing is difficult. It's a difficult labor market. How do you find staff? How do you retain staff? And with very action-oriented items that people are discussing. We talk about some of the ways that we can use AI to maybe reduce the staff burden. You all know the amount of AI out there is mind-boggling. How do you even sit down and evaluate what to use? How do you come up with a way to change these things? These aren't easy problems or easy to address. A lot of the economics from retina comes from the drug utilization side. How do you do that? What's the best practice for inventory management? What's the best practice for negotiation? What's the best practice for all these things that can make a huge difference for the bottom line? And then that's mainly what we do on the Saturday meeting. And then Sunday morning is always coding. We start with coding. There's a lot of new coding changes every year. If you don't know what you're doing there, you're caught flat-footed and you could lose a lot of revenue that way. So we
Great way
start
to
with
wake up on a
coding.
Sunday.
I know, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, that's exactly what I want. But it's one of the most well-attended parts of the meeting every
Yeah.
year. So, yeah, very
And
effective.
Tom, is this coding good enough that if you get your update at the business of retina meeting, you're good for the year?
Yeah, I mean, we typically engage Joy Woodkey, who is the AAO sort of coder, and she
Yeah.
goes through it very thoroughly. We have Ankur Shah, who, is part of the RUC, he's a physician in Houston, actually. And so I mean, these are people who are helping make the decisions about coding and helping, figuring out how coding is done. And so it's a very effective way. I mean, I learn so much every year and I think I know what I'm doing. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. So, modifier 25 has been a big issue over the last 6 months. What do you do? How do you do it? What's the compliance? These are the things that we're talking about.
And then, Tom, how do people register for the meeting? They can't come if they don't register. What's the best way?
So right on the ASRS website, asrs.org, there's a button there, the Business of Retina meeting. Registration is open, early bird registration just ended, but this is the sort of thing they can just click on there and register, and you can even register up to the day that you're there.
And Tom, I noticed you all are doing a clinical trials workshop. Is this something you've done years previous, or is this a new brainchild for this year?
Yeah. So, I've been really fortunate to have stood on the shoulders of giants. I've only been doing this for a couple of 2 years. Other folks have led this before, and I've got a really strong committee of other physicians, retina physicians across the country who have been helping coordinate this. And, as well as the ASRS staff is just amazing with this. Um, Vivian Howe, who practices at Kaiser Permanente out in the West Coast, she, has basically had to create a clinical trials program within her program. She said, a lot of people want this. So we've had talks about how do you start clinical trials in your practice, and you can learn a lot from a 20-minute talk, but that's a very complex topic that a lot of people don't know much about. So
So the workshop is like a hands-on thing where it's
yeah,
small groups and breakout sessions, and is it geared towards people who haven't done clinical trials, or is it applicable to people who've done clinical trials but want to get better at doing them? Who is the target audience here?
all that. Mainly people who haven't done it, right? So, how do you start? And the day, and Vivian's done an amazing job working with experts in the field. And this is the first year we've ever done it. We asked if we wanted to do it. People said, yes, we want to do it. And she's put together an amazing program. And basically it starts from the what, how and what, like, how do I even get started on this? Like, what's the first step? Because people want to join a practice or the practice wants to do these things. There's not a lot of information. And then the who, like, who do you need? What's the responsibilities of a PI? How do I get a clinical research coordinator? How do I do these nuts and bolts things? And John, you and I both know how difficult that can be to not only hire them, but to train them and then retain them. And then at the end, it's like, what are the strategies? Like, what's a good budget? Like, how much should I ask for if you've never done it, you have no idea. So these are all the things, and we're working hand in hand with industry. This is not a CME event. This is let's teach people how to do this with industry working hand in hand with us. And it's all day on Friday. It's actually a separate registration from the Business of Retina meeting. And, we thought we might have 50 people, and we said, well, let's have room for 80. We're up to 71 and we're still over a month away. So anybody who's interested in this, get on there, register for that, because if you don't, you probably won't. We're going to run out of room soon.
So it's
been a
capped
ton of
out at
interest.
80. So we've got
It's
9
capped
more
out at 80.
spots. Okay, wow, that's hot news. And do you have to arrive a day early to be a
You
part
do.
of that? Okay.
Yeah, that's all day Friday. So that's where that first day of the conference is that's all that is, the first day. And the official conference starts that Friday night with some social time. Yeah.
Can we explore a little bit more how industry is going to be a part of this conversation? Because I was wondering, like, they have to be
Yeah.
there if this is going to be a clinical trial workshop, but
Yeah.
I'm wondering if they're there. And then also CROs, are they involved at all?
CROs are involved. And in fact, that's part of what we're talking about is, like, you and I know what a CRO is, but if somebody's blind to research, they say, well, what is a CRO? What does it even mean? What's the interaction? How does that relationship work? What can they do for me? What do I have to do for them? That kind of thing. So yes, CROs are going to be involved. And a lot of it is just creating relationships. The other thing we're trying to do with this is we're talking to trusted and known researchers and trying to create a mentorship program where if someone wants to try to do research, they just have somebody to call and, like, hey man, what do you do with this? Or, hey, can I run this something by you? Or what's your experience been with this CRO? So industry is definitely interested in this, and they're going to be there, and they're going to be supporting the program.
So Tom, just for completeness sake, CRO is a contract research organization. They're the people who administer the studies, basically. They're kind of the bridge between the pharmaceutical industry and the clinical research site that wants to do the research. You talked about mentorship. We often hear our fellows ask, how am I going to learn all this billing and coding stuff and how to run a practice? Is this meeting appropriate for fellows? Do fellows go?
So interesting you asked that because some of it is, but some of it isn't. I mean, some of this is really more high level practice management of the bigger practices. So a year ago, we initiated a fellow section, and we started this, when we were in Atlanta last year. We offered, travel grants for fellows who wanted to come. And we had about 15 fellows who came, and we had a clamoring of interest. And again, as part of our committee, Alex Melmood, who's at our RGW here on the East Coast, he's really championed this. He's taken this one and he's created a whole curriculum based off of the AMA has a sort of a business curriculum that they recommend for all physicians. And he's taken that and he's created, you have the general business principles, you've got the IT, you've got the HR, you've got, all the basic elements of running a business. So he's crafted a full day agenda for the fellows all around how to run a retina practice based on that information. And it's going to run all day Saturday. And it's really, so this year we have, gosh, I think we're up to almost 40 fellows who are going to be attending, maybe more. And our capacity is, I think, 45. So, and we've had people apply for it and people from all over the country. Yeah.
Well, first year you've had it and you've got 40 fellows there. That's really amazing.
Yeah. This is officially the second year, but this is the one. Last year was kind of a beta, what's it going to look like? And this year Alex has really put his heart and soul into it. It's really taken off.
And that's all grant funded, Tom?
Yes. ASRS is supporting that, I mean, think about it. I mean, John, when you and I are in fellowship, there was one fellowship meeting up in Chicago in the middle of winter, and it was great, and it's still going on, and it's wonderful. And there's lots of other fellowship meetings now, but they're all clinical, and I mean, we don't really do a very good job in our fellowship of training business. I mean, we try kind of on the side, but this is like a curriculum. This is something that people ask questions about. This is something if you don't know, and some of this is, hey, how do you negotiate a contract when you're trying to get a job? We are looking at this as potentially one of the big recruiting sections for physicians who are looking for doctors and for fellows who don't have a job yet. So we originally were gearing it towards second-year fellows, but now we're moving it more toward first-year fellows. We've got a lot of first-year fellows. And in fact, we have residents now. We agreed, let's have some residents come in who are going to start their fellowship. Let's get this education off the ground sooner rather than later.
Perfect timing.
It really is.
All right, Tom, thanks for coming on the show. Tom Stone is the program committee chair for the ASRS Business of Retina meeting. Stay with us. We're going to go to the vitreoretinal view segment.
Thanks to Alcon for making this RetinUp conversation possible and for delivering solutions like Unity VCS that help surgeons experience extraordinary. Discover more at unityvcs.com.
Well, it's a great honor to be joined by my good friend, mentor, someone who's been so instrumental in so many retina surgeons' lives, so influential with women in retina, Dr. Maria Berrocal. Maria, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, John. It's a pleasure.
Now, Maria, last time we talked, Scott, you were actually there. It was at ASRS. We did a video with Maria, Steve Charles, and myself, and it was right around the time that Unity was launching. And we talked about all the features of Unity. You've now had the Unity VCS system since that time, a lot of time with it. What has kind of surprised you? What are some of the things that as you've had it longer and longer, you've kind of learned to appreciate more?
Well, there's a lot of things that I love about the Unity, I have to say. What I think I like the most is that it provides a seamless experience. There's no glitches. The setup is very quick. It's very easy. Cassettes are smaller. There's less tubing, so it's much more intuitive to use. The fluidics are great, so you don't have any collapse of the globe, any movements in there. It's a very stable fluidic environment. And having 30,000 cuts per minute and 27 gauge optimized so that there's no bending of instruments, cannulas are not coming out, it allows me to do a very complicated case from start to finish without any issues. Not having to unbend the light pipe, not having to put the trocar in because it came out, not having bleeding because the pressures are not well controlled. And the beauty of 30,000 cuts per minute with the 27 gauge platform is that you can really get at the surface of the retina and just do surface vitrectomy. I thought I was doing surface vitrectomy before with 27 gauge, but there's absolutely no comparison. And this just provides a lot of opportunities for us to tackle cases in different ways, devise different methods of doing surgery.
You know, Maria, they've got a different pump system in the Unity. You're now able to do flow-based vitrectomy. That's a transition from Constellation. Do you find that you're doing almost 100% flow-based vitrectomy, or do you still go back to that Venturi system and use traditional vitrectomy?
I do everything flow-based except when I go to do an air fluid exchange. Then I go into vacuum because it's faster. That's the only time that I actually use vacuum-based.
I want to zoom out for a second. We're marching quickly into 2026, and you're somebody that I always think of as sharing the latest innovation, getting your hands on the newest instrument, demonstrating the newest technique. No spoilers, but is there anything you're working on this year or ready to start talking about this year on the podium or that you're sharing with trainees?
Yes. Well, I looked at my Unity cases that I have done since I started using the Unity, and my last cases that I did with the Constellation on 27 gauge, because I really think 27 gauge is the future. It hasn't been adopted that much because of all the issues we had with 27 gauge, maybe getting clogged because it was not fluid based vitrectomy, maybe having the instruments be more malleable, bending in hard cases. And now that we have the full armamentarium, I think we're all going to be doing everything 27. I've been doing mostly, practically everything 27 gauge with, I think, much better results because I can do it as quickly. The vitrectomy is as fast as 25 because of the fluid-based system and the flow is constant no matter what medium you're in. And that allows me to do much more precise maneuvers that I couldn't do before. And when I looked at, and I will be presenting this shortly in the upcoming meetings, but I looked and compared my cases, really the time was much less with the Unity system, but not only the time, but the complications like instrument complications, bending, trocars coming out, etc., were significantly reduced.
So, Maria, I think you're exactly right. Like, it's just such a refinement. Everything about the Unity is an upgrade from the little experiences like the cannulas, the trocars just are so much better. The way you hold your infusion line in place. I mean, you're right. The instruments are stiff. They are 25 gauge instruments. And I love that you're going to talk about this. Where are we going to hear about this at? Is it going to be AAO? Is it going to be ASRS? Or is it going to be one of the European meetings?
You're going to hear about this at Retina World Congress, at ASRS, and at Retina.
All right. Fantastic. So all over the world, Scott, you're going to hear about this all over the world. And Maria always draws such a huge crowd. There's like a zen, Maria, when watching your videos. It just is so pleasant to watch you operate. So I can't wait to see what you're going to bring this year.
Well, I love this machine. I have to say that it has totally changed the way I do things. I do a lot of combined cases now, which I didn't do before just because I did not like the phaco of the Constellation. But now it is the best phaco out there. I do a lot of phacos, combined cases, and I do the phaco. And hands out, this machine is a total game changer compared to anything else out there for phacos. So you can do a combined case very, very quickly without having to pre-place cannulas or without having to do any maneuver with the same cassette.
So, Maria, let me ask you, for our phaco surgeons out there, our retina surgeons that do phacos, what is it that makes it better? Is it the stability of the chamber? Is it the flow-based system? What is the enhancement that you find with this?
Well, it has all these sensors. So it has intelligent entry, it has intelligent fluidics. So you have a uber stable anterior chamber, and it has 4D phaco, which means that the pieces are not jumping all over the place. Once it grabs a piece, it instantly goes out. So it's much more efficient and faster. And the chambers being more stable just means that the corneas are crystal clear the next day.
Amazing.
Dr. Maria Berrocal is the CEO of Doctors Berrocal and Associates in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and she's an associate professor at the University of Puerto Rico. Dr. Berrocal, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome back to RetinUp. Today we are joined by David Mandell. He's the co-founder and a partner at the OJM Group, a wealth management firm with a set of services specialized for physicians. David, welcome to RetinUp.
I'm pleased to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, David, thanks for joining us. Just to kind of start things off, you all at OJM work almost exclusively with physicians. What really drew you to just saying we're going to focus on physicians and their needs from financial management standpoint?
Sure. Well, I think it was back in law school for me, which is now 30 plus years ago. I was helping my father, who's a radiologist, trying to help him get his wills done. And I wasn't equipped to do it yet, but it was helping him kind of figure that out. And I realized that helping him, my brother, who's a physician, my grandfather before, who I wasn't able to help because he wasn't around when I came up, but that was going to be my path. And so it was in the blood or in the genes, as they say. I did not go into medicine like my younger brother, who's a cardiologist down the street from me, who I'll see on Wednesday. But so I've been helping docs since the beginning of my career.
Let's talk a little bit about financial planning for physicians, because this is your expertise. And we wanted to start with younger retina doctors. So these are the doctors, their first, 3, 5, 6 years out of fellowship. What are some of the wealth management priorities that these younger retina specialists often overlook?
Well, I think one thing is a lot of docs come out, especially retina specialists, with a lot of debt, but they have income. And their net present value, I'll use a finance term, of their income in the future makes them multimillionaires, but they don't feel it because they have a lot of debt and that income hasn't come yet. So one thing we're making sure docs do, and retina specialists would certainly fall into this because of what they're doing to treat patients, is look at their disability insurance. Make sure they protect the downside. I mean, docs learn this in practice, first do no harm. Well, let's look at that in the context of a doc's own financial planning. Let's try to protect what they've got, and that will depend life insurance too, potentially, if they have dependents, right? I mean, some retina specialists may come out and be married already or have kids, and so we've got to think about that. One thing that I don't think is ignored, but it is, or overlooked, but is a balancing act, and this is where I think financial advisors can be really helpful if they're good, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but is balancing debt repayment with savings, with buying the home, with investing. I have an extra dollar now, or a lot more than an extra dollar, an extra 100,000, whatever it is, every month, quarter, year. What do I do with it, right? Once I've come out, should I pay down the loan? Should I put it away for the home? Should I start a portfolio and start a Roth or what have you? There's really no right answer, and balancing that for each individual physician, their family, is, the art and science of wealth management at that stage of career.
David, when we think about this, we come out, we have this high earning potential, and we've struggled through medical school and residency and fellowship in a lot of ways. You get almost a lottery winners type scenario where you're now making money, maybe not partnership money, but you're making good money. Attractiveness of a new car, a bigger house and whatnot is just there. I went through it myself.
Yeah.
What is the biggest mistake that somebody in their first 3 or 4 years tends to make?
Yeah, and what you're describing, we might call that lifestyle creep, right? I mean, when you make $1, you kind of live on $1. When you make $10, you start to live on $10, right? You get the biggest house, and there's a little bit of, I worked so hard, I kind of deserve this, right? And when we're working with clients, we don't want to cut that off completely. There is a value to having some reward, to feel good that, but we also don't want to go overboard. So I think the key is sort of balancing that natural human urge to rewards oneself, now that we're making income with a longer plan. And I think it's easier to do when there is a plan, right? When there's, okay, if I've saved this much, there's a model. This is where I might be in 10, 15, 20 years. I'm old enough now to think that 10, 15, 20 years isn't that long a time period. But when you're in your early 30s coming out of fellowship, that may seem like forever. So tying that to some kind of concrete plan will, I think, allow people to not completely get rid of lifestyle creep, but balance it in a way that is a little healthier for not only their mindset, but also their actual balance sheet and their financial position.
And David, is there anything unique to retinal physicians as opposed to a cardiovascular surgeon or a gerontologist or some other specialty, or can you kind of apply these across the board to all physicians?
And what we help physicians with at OJM Group and then Earned, which I'll talk about, there really isn't. I mean, there's a difference, I think, between specialists like the kind you're talking about, retina, cardiovascular, et cetera, and a general practitioner or a family medicine or employee doc, where there's not the liability or tax consequences that we start to talk in when we get into docs in the main part of practice, which I know we'll get to. But if we're just talking specialists, there's certainly a lot of difference when we get into what's going on in the practice from a revenue, from a billing and coding, from an employment, from a ancillary point of view. But from what we're doing in core sort of personal wealth management, these are pretty applicable across the board.
David, you mentioned securing the advice of a financial planner if they're good.
Yeah.
When do you start securing the advice of a financial planner, and how do you know if they're good?
Yeah. So, again, obviously, I mentioned being a lawyer and I still have a law practice, but I've spent most of my time, you mentioned OJM Group, at OJM, which is a wealth management firm. So, there's a little bias there, of course, because I believe in having professional advice, just like, same thing on the legal side. But pretty early on, I think once the physicians, start to come out and maybe even before fellowship, getting with somebody, and this gets into their business model and how a doc can hire a firm before they have a lot of assets, before they have a lot of free cash flow. And that's a different issue. But in terms of the advice being valuable, it can be really early on, can make a difference because obviously compound interest and all that kind of stuff, any things you can do early on have a big impact over time. In terms of how do you find one that's good? Well, we have a whole number of chapters on in the book. We'll talk about how to get our book for free, but it really gets into, to me, and this is our approach, and we have a chart on this or kind of a diagram or illustration in our book, which is transparency equals trust. Trust is the most important thing, I think, for doctors finding a financial advisor. Second would be their expertise, meaning, do they know what they're talking about? It'd be no different than me trying to find a retina surgeon, right? I want to make sure they're actually competent and can do the procedure and diagnose and treat. And then I want to trust them. Well, in medicine, there's a lot of safeguards there to make sure that, in general, people can trust their physicians, right? In finance, there really isn't that many. I'll just give you one example, and there's 1,000, but just the term financial advisor, okay? You can be a financial advisor, not even have a college degree and just be a high school diploma taking some security test, or you could be a PhD in economics and anything in between, and your experience can be different, okay? And that's on purpose, right? That's different than, a board-certified ophthalmologist, right? At least I know what they have. So they may not be retina specialists, but at least I know they know something about the eyes, and they've taken tests to approve that, and I know I have a certain level of training. So transparency to trust really gets into understanding the business model of the financial advisor you're working with. I mean, people have lots of lawyer jokes. My dad had a lot of lawyer jokes as a physician, but most people, if they like their lawyer, well, one of the reasons they might like them is because they understand what they're getting and what they're paying. Meaning people, when I was a lawyer, and I still do this, if I work for somebody, I try to do it on a flat fee basis, right? So this is what you're going to get, a will and trust. This is what it's going to cost. If it's an hourly basis where every time they're talking to me or every time they think I'm working, I'm jacking up the bill, now there's a tension there. So transparency to trust, what that means is understand how your financial advisor makes money. Right? Are they making
Okay.
money on a fee? Are they making money because they're recommending products and they get commissions? Are they making money on some kind of planning engagement? If you don't understand that, and I have a lot of really smart, sophisticated docs who come to us and they're like, I work with this guy at X firm. I'm not really sure how much money I paid him, right? Because it's coming out of the investments, et cetera. That's not a good place to be. So big picture advice, obviously you want to get financial advisors who have expertise, and that could be asking people that in a similar position, your colleagues, et cetera. It could be, what we do, putting out content and books and expertise. But then understanding how that financial firm advisor makes money is key to transparency, which is key to trust. So those are the two things, expertise and trust.
And David, is it fair to just ask? I mean, it feels so awkward to say to somebody, how do you make money? Is it fair to just walk in, or is that something we should expect a financial planner to say, listen, I want you to understand how I'm going to make money helping you?
I would say yes and yes. Okay, a good advisor is going to explain it from the beginning. Like if I'm on a call with a client, if somebody listens to this and they get our book and they call and they want to do a free consult with me, I'm going to listen first, take a lot of notes, understand where they're at, and then say, this is how we work with physicians. And most of the time, they're engaging us in a flat fee planning process. And my goal in that first conversation is to give them an idea what that fee will be. So they know right from the beginning, if they come through this process, what it's going to cost. Okay. But to your point, John, if that's not clear, ask. We have 7 questions to ask. Again, we don't have time to go through all, but it's in the chapter, 7 questions you should ask your financial advisor. And it's not just when you're interviewing, but even the ones we're already working with them. And number 1 is, how do you make money? And 2, what's your professional obligation to me? What's your duty, fiduciary, or what have you? Does your firm make money in ways? It might not even be the advisor, but maybe the advisor at a firm that creates product, right, that has funds, has an incentive to put you in their company's funds, not other funds, even if they're not in your best interest, right? And you want to understand that from the get-go. So if I go to firm X and the advisor recommends all firm X funds, well, that would be like me going to a doc who's employed by Pfizer, and every time I'm sick, they say, oh, here's a great Pfizer product. It might be a great product. Pfizer's a great company, but there's a reason docs aren't employed by Pfizer in our system, right? Because you guys are both saying, look, the face that you guys are making, like, that would be terrible. But welcome to the world of finance.
Let's move now to the mid-career retina specialists, the doctors that are 10, 12, 15 years out of practice. They're really hitting their stride professionally, and these people are at their peak earning potential. What 2 or 3 shifts in behavior do they need to initiate as they reach this point in their career?
Yeah. So first thing is everything we were just talking about in terms of how to find a financial advisor with expertise or you can trust, it applies because some docs are going to do that in the early stage of their career. Some docs are not going to get to it until they're 5, 7, 10 years because life happens. And they just put that on the to-do list on their desk, and then eventually they get around to it. Okay, but the 2 things that come up in the years where docs are taking most of the call, earning most of the money, et cetera, tax planning becomes number 1. It is by far the thing that I get asked about and my firm does the most is help me save taxes. Okay. And there's a lot more sort of, John, to your point, it isn't so much you asked, hey, does this apply across specialties? In our world, especially when it comes to taxes, the thing that's most important is, do they have their own practice or not? Are you in a group where you can make some decisions about, am I an S Corp or a C Corp, or what kind of benefit plan I can put in place, or a non-qualified plan? If have a really high income as a retina specialist, but you're a W-2 employee, you're employed by a large institution, talk about Lexington, University of Kentucky, or whatever it is, okay, we can still do some things tax-wise on the personal planning, especially if people start having side hustles, right? They're doing things outside of the practice, whether that's ancillaries or other, sources of income. We can do it, but that becomes oftentimes the number one thing that we're working with clients. Our client docs are asking about when they get to mid-career. The second thing is a concern about liability and an emphasis on protecting assets from potential liability. And frankly, that's what I started my career as a lawyer doing the way back 30 years ago. I wrote a book in 1996 called The Doctor's Asset Protection Guide because my father, a radiologist, was concerned. He said, listen, I try to do the best for patients, but when you're reading 100 x-rays a day or whatever the number was, you're going to make a mistake. You're human, right? And he didn't want to gamble everything the family was building on the insurance covering it. I mean, maybe there's a claim outside of that, et cetera. And today we have other things we have to concern about, are HIPAA violations or employee issues, or people doing rental real estate, et cetera. So what I see for mid-career retina specialists and docs in other specialties is a real focus on help me save taxes and help me protect assets against potential liability.
So, David, let's say you're 50 and you weren't disciplined early on. How do you get back on track?
Well, it comes, we were talking about college basketball before we recorded. Well, I went to UCLA for grad school, okay? And the wizard of Westwood, John Wooden, said, "A failure to plan is a plan to fail." So I think you have to start with a plan, meaning whether you're 50, and certainly we have docs who've gotten divorced, okay? We have docs who were in the military, didn't start till late. We have docs, for whatever reason, had a bunch of kids and just expensive private schools, and all the money went somewhere. And so now they're at a certain point, whether it's 50 or 45 or 55, whatever it is, and they say, okay, now I only have this much runway left. How are we going to get there? And that starts with a plan, because you can't have the confidence or the discipline to stick to it unless you know there's going to be some, pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, the analogy, right? So I think that's the number one thing for clients, especially if they feel like they're behind the eight ball a bit, is to map out a plan, best case, worst case, middle case, and then work with an advisor to help build that plan and then revisit it, right? Every quarter, every year, to say, how am I doing against it? My income was higher, was it lower? Taxes higher or lower? Or returns higher and lower? And try to triangulate to where they want to go.
PE. Private equity has been a huge mover in our space, David, acquiring retina practices, some large groups and whatnot.
Yep.
How are you advising doctors differently in the PE era than the pre-PE era?
Yeah. So when docs come to us and they say, and certainly ophthalmology is a big piece of it, but we dealt with it before in pain management, dermatology, lots of different specialties have gone through this, is the first thing that we help clients with. I have certainly a network of investment banking firms and healthcare transaction attorneys who, are really there to help create a deal or structure it. But what we're doing at OJM Group often is helping clients say, okay, if we do this, what does it look like, right? Because typically what happens is you get a nice chunk of money up front, but your income comes down, right? And then ideally there's a second bite of the apple if there's another transaction. What does that mean to me as the doc? What does it mean to my family, to my spouse, et cetera? So at least going in, I'm making a decision with my partners of whether we want to do this or not, knowing how it affects my personal financial life. And that gets back to that plan and that model I was just referencing, which is, what does it look like, right? And depending on what the deal looks like, the docs who are older, it may be a little bit better for them because they're close, they have less runway. So that chunk up front isn't, the reduction in income isn't as long. But we've seen it work very well for clients over time in different specialties. We don't get into at all clinical issues, right? Like how are they going to affect the day-to-day going to work and treating patients? That's for another guest, not me. But in terms of evaluating the financial deal and how it impacts their personal financial future, we're involved with that all the time.
John, we've seen a lot of doctors who are at the end of their career hit that private equity buyout. And it was really perfect timing for them, right? But some of the ones that were mid-career have changes thrust upon them in maybe ways that they didn't anticipate. I'd like to shift to some of those doctors at the end of their career. David, you mentioned sometimes somebody comes to you with a 20-year runway. What about when that runway is 5 years? They're coming in for the landing, if I can change the metaphor a little bit.
Yeah.
What do they need to start focusing on? Is this like estate planning time? Is it something else? Let's say you've got 3 to 5 years left of practicing. What do you need to look at?
Yeah. So first thing is you're going to see a through line through all three phases. Have that plan, be revisiting it, right? It gets even more important as you get closer to retirement, whatever that is, right? Retirement can mean a lot of things to docs. It could be part-time. It could be just changing into some ancillary work, et cetera. But whatever that is, sticking to that model and understanding it. Probably, one of the important things to do at that time, and certainly when you get to retirement, is to reposition the portfolio so it's more defensive and you avoid, and again, we get into this in the book with some good examples, the sequence of return risk. And eventually, what that really means is you could have two portfolios. We have a great example in the book on this of the exact same average or mean return, right? And column A or doc A, let's say, has a bunch of positive years in the beginning and then some middle and then some negative years later on in retirement. Doc B has the exact same mean return and the exact same returns on a yearly basis. It's just reversed. So they have a bunch of negative years up front. Well, Doc A has plenty of money even at their presumed passing away that they can leave as a legacy. Doc B runs out of money. Right? So same mean returns, same returns over 20 years, they're just reversed. And what that means is it's called the sequence of returns risk, which is you don't want to come into retirement and have a bunch of negative years up front. I mean, docs who retired in 2006, 7, 8, 9 face this.
Sure.
And a lot of them said, oh, I'm not retired anymore. I got to go back to work, right? We don't want that, right? Somebody wants to go back to work, that's fine, but we don't want them to have to. Right? So looking at that portfolio and de-risking it, not all at once, not hitting, getting, hit with a bunch of taxes to do it. But you said 3 to 5 years out, retirement red zone, coming in for the landing, but not landing yet. That's when you want to start repositioning, not to take risk off completely. My mom, survived my dad who retired and, she's in her 80s. There's still some equity exposure there and that's done really well for her. So we're not talking about completely going to cash or bonds, but we're maybe moving from 70% cash over time to 30, 40%. I mean, 70% equities to 30, 40%. Doing that over time in a thoughtful, tax neutral way is a big part of that stage of career.
And David, we're in such a volatile time. I mean, you see interest rates go up almost overnight to an amazing level as far as how quick they went up. You see the dollar potentially devalued, gold going up. How do you stay on top of everything when it seems like you're just walking on quicksand financially?
So getting into markets, that's my partners, right? So one of the things about our firm is we have specialized. We stay in our lanes, right? So my area of expertise, just like medicine, right, is asset protection, because that's my background as a lawyer, right? So I know enough about the markets. They manage my money in the portfolios. But again, I think it gets back to long-term goals, right? We never know what a market will do tomorrow, but we can look back over 30, 50, 70, 100 years and say, okay, certain things sort of move together, certain things don't, and alternatives are a key part of our portfolio, right? So it's private investments, it could be venture, it could be private debt, private credit, et cetera. So there's some things that buffer the public markets, but it's not trying to predict in general. We're not a firm that's trying to predict what the market's going to do next month or next quarter, but more how are our clients positioned for the long period. Doesn't mean we don't tweak things. Doesn't mean we don't see opportunities on the margins and do some, shifts to allocations, but we're not a firm that's, trying to pick stocks and outperform. We say, if you use a baseball analogy, we're all over analogies, but I think it's helpful. We're trying to help our clients hit singles and doubles and the occasional homer, but we're not trying to swing for the fences every time. Now, some of our docs may do that with their own money, but they and their spouse are saying, okay, you guys manage most of it and try to hit doubles, and I'll take a chance from time to time on a big swing. And that's okay. Again, it gets back to even what we were talking about before, John, on lifestyle. We're not trying to make people computers or like automatons. We understand there's some people have a love for investing and they want to do some trading. And we say, yeah, do that, but let's take care of the main port of the family wealth in a way that's conservative and trying to reach your goals for the long term.
And David, we've got a great opportunity for our listeners to download your book. Scott, where can they find that? And what's the code that they can use to get a free copy of David's book?
So the code is RetinUp26, the name of our podcast, RetinUp, the year 2026. So RetinUp26 is the code. David, where can they go to download this book? And I think there's a couple, right?
Yeah, so they can go to learn about our firm and what we do, go to ojmgroup.com. And at the top, you'll see resources. We have a lot of articles. We have a free newsletter. We have a podcast that I host, which hopefully you guys, if you're a podcast person, you might want to tune into that. Or you can go right to ojmbookstore.com, ojmbookstore.com.
So aside from downloading that book, David, one last question. What is the one thing a retina doctor can do over the next 90 days to start to improve their financial outlook?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to answer that and just say, when you go to the bookstore, you put that code in when you check out. So you'll see a price point, and a lot of your colleagues are paying for a book, and that's great. I'm not getting wealthy on the book, but you can fill in that code at checkout and you get it for free, and that's a thanks for having me on, and hopefully you guys will take advantage of that resource. So, I think, John, to answer your question, it's just dedicate some time. I mean, we're kind of self-selecting here because the people who are listening and watching your podcast are acting as the CEO of their career, right? Are taking the time to work on their practice and their career, not just in it. And that's the biggest hurdle to overcome for most busy docs. I mean, you know this. I mean, time is the most important and valuable resource retina surgeons have. And so if they can dedicate some time, whether it's our book or our podcast or your book podcast, learning that there's resources, and maybe they'll get motivated to take the next step, which is talking to someone like me or a firm like ours. We'd love you guys to all listening, watching to become clients of ours, but there's lots of smart people out there. We're not the only ones, but spend some time, start looking at how you could improve. Because one thing I can guarantee you, I've told clients this over the years, there's always something to be improved on: legal, tax, financial, investing, insurances. Everybody could be more efficient and be more optimized.
David Mandell is a co-founder and partner at the OJM Group. It's a wealth management firm with a set of services specialized for physicians. David, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, fair to say that David Mandell had a lot of useful information. John, did any of that sound like it would apply to, I don't know, you or somebody like you?
Listen, I had not met David before we did this, Scott. I think you knew David and introduced me to him. As I'm listening to him, I'm thinking, gosh, I do a lot of consulting, a lot of speaking, and I just don't do anything. I don't have an LLC set up. I just file it under my personal income taxes, and I really feel like I'm throwing a lot of money away. And so I feel like I'm going to reach out to David actually and see if he can help get me organized on that and take advantage of some of the tax benefits. So absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of retina specialists out there that have these small side hustles, right? And they start as, sitting on an advisory committee or going to an advisory board, and then they're, serving in a larger capacity. Next thing you know, they've collected so many individual kind of small payments, and they stuff them all in the same container. It's like, you can eat one French fry, but then you eat 100 French fries in the container, and now you have a large French fry for McDonald's. And if you're not putting that into some sort of tax-advantaged structure, you're just flushing some money down the drain. I don't know, it's a lot of invisible cash that if you just think a little bit more thoughtfully about it, could actually, stay in your account rather than going to the IRS.
And you know what, Scott? I've got a great investment guy with Merrill Lynch. I've got a great tax group that helps me manage my taxes, but not once has any of them stepped in and said, hey, you know what? you should set this up because there's tax advantages to you being incorporated for your consulting. And so I feel like that is something that is more holistic that David would look at. And so I'm definitely going to download his book, and then I'll probably reach out to him and see what he can set up for me.
Yeah, again, that code is RetinUp26 if you go to ojmgroup.com. John, final question. Through all of your training, obviously you learn a lot about medicine, you learn a lot about surgery. When do you learn these business practices? Where is this something that's part of a formal retina surgeon's training, or is this something that you just pick up along the way?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And we have a fellowship, a private practice fellowship, so that'd be a good place to actually learn about financial planning, but we don't teach it. We didn't learn it. I fortunately had some partners that I joined that were good mentors, but a lot of it I just kind of learned on my own. And I'll tell you, through a lot of mistakes. I mean, I had lottery winner syndrome. I got out in a new car every couple of years and, upgraded houses a couple of times and fortunately stayed married. So that is probably your biggest ability to maintain wealth is to not get divorced. But um, probably it took me about 15 years to learn that you can't buy happiness. And I tried, and you can't. But what you can do is you can save for security, you can save for your family, and you can feel disciplined. And it takes some of us longer to get there, but certainly I think somebody like David could help get you there sooner and establish that sooner.
Yeah, establishing financial security to me feels like something that you may not realize in the immediate moment. And then when you look back 20 years later, if you have financial security, you go, boy, this is happiness, or at least this isn't stress.
That's right.
All right, everyone, thank you for listening to RetinUp. You should subscribe to our newsletter. Visit retinup.com or scan the QR code on your screen if you're watching us on YouTube. If you are watching the show on YouTube, leave us a comment. We'll talk about it on the next episode. Or if you'd like, you can send a voice recording to our mailbag. We have a mailbag episode coming up. We're looking for 1 or 2 more entries. info@retinup.com. Send us a voice recording, and you can get John's thoughts on what's happening in retina or in ophthalmology at large. Again, subscribe to the newsletter, retinup.com.